He knows everything, I whispered. I stared at the worn leather journal lying exposed on my office desk, where I'd always kept it locked away. Martin stood in the doorway, his face a mask of righteous indignation rather than guilt. You shouldn't keep secrets from your husband, Sarah. His voice was eerily calm as he crossed his arms. 15 years of marriage, and I'm still finding out who you really are. I lunged for the journal, but he stepped forward and placed his hand firmly on it. I think we need to discuss some of these thoughts you've been having, especially the ones about my mother. My stomach dropped as I realized exactly which entries he'd read. The private venting about his overbearing mother, my occasional fantasies about moving across the country, the frustrations I never voiced aloud. Things never meant for anyone's eyes but mine. This wasn't the first time Martin had crossed boundaries. I remembered how early in our marriage he'd check my phone while I showered, claiming he was just seeing who called. How he'd slowly increased his scrutiny over my friendships, always with reasonable-sounding concerns. How he'd installed that home security system last year, insisting it was for safety, though the interior cameras had always made me uneasy. How long? I demanded, my voice barely audible. Long enough to understand you've been lying to me for years. Martin picked up the journal and flipped to a dog-eared page. What kind of wife writes that she sometimes wonders if she made a mistake? I grabbed my journal and clutched it to my chest, backing away. Without another word, I grabbed my coat and car keys, brushed past him, and walked out the front door as he called after me. Running away won't fix your dangerous thinking, Sarah. The library had always been my sanctuary, and now, as I sat in my locked office in the biography section, I tried to make sense of what had just happened. 15 years with Martin, and I never suspected he was the type of man who would violate my privacy so completely. My hands shook as I flipped through my journal, noting dog ears on pages dating back years. Years. He'd been reading my private thoughts for years. He's been reading your journal? My sister Rachel's voice rose in disbelief over the phone. That's a complete violation, Sarah. I leaned against the cool glass of the phone booth outside the library. I hadn't wanted to risk calling from my office phone. I know, but he doesn't see it that way. He thinks he was justified because I was hiding things from him. What things? Your private thoughts? Your perfectly normal frustrations? Sarah, this isn't healthy. I closed my eyes, fighting tears. I don't know what to do, Rach. The way he looked at me, like I'd betrayed him. And then he said he needed to talk to me about my dangerous thoughts. Dangerous thoughts? Rachel's voice hardened. Sarah, listen to me. Can you come stay with me for a few days? Just to clear your head. I glanced at my watch. It was nearly 5, and I should have been heading home to start dinner. Martin would be expecting me. I don't know if I can. He'll be upset if I don't come home. That's exactly why you need to come here. Please, Sarah. Just for tonight. I hesitated, then felt a surge of determination. Okay, I'll be there in an hour. As I pulled into Rachel's driveway in St. Paul, my phone buzzed with a text from Martin. Where are you? Dinner's getting cold. We need to talk about what I found. I turned off my phone without responding and grabbed my overnight bag. Whatever conversation Martin wanted to have could wait until I'd processed what had happened. Rachel opened the door before I could knock, pulling me into a tight hug. I made up the guest room and opened wine. Thanks. I followed her inside, the familiar scent of her cinnamon candles instantly soothing my frayed nerves. I feel like I'm going crazy, Rach. Like maybe I'm overreacting. She poured me a generous glass of red wine. You're not overreacting. Reading someone's private journal is a massive breach of trust. He made it sound like I was the one breaking trust by writing my feelings down. I sank onto her couch, like I should have told him every fleeting thought I've ever had. That's manipulation, plain and simple. Rachel sat beside me. How long do you think he's been reading it? I took a long sip of wine. Based on which pages were marked? At least 3 years. 3 years? Jesus, Sarah. I know. And the way he talked about it, so calm, so self-righteous. like he had every right. I shuddered. The worst part is wondering how many of my decisions he influenced by knowing what I was thinking. How many times did he subtly steer me away from something I wrote about wanting? Rachel's face darkened. Like that job in Chicago you turned down? Exactly. I wrote for weeks about whether to take it. I stared into my wine glass. He was so understanding when I decided not to. Said all the right things about supporting whatever I chose. But he already knew exactly what your fears were, and exactly how to exploit them. We sat in silence for a moment, the magnitude of the betrayal expanding with each memory I re-examined. Have you checked your phone? Rachel asked. I shook my head and reluctantly turned it back on. 17 missed calls and a stream of texts ranging from concerned to angry. The latest one made my blood run cold. I called Mom. We're worried about your mental state. These outbursts aren't healthy. He told his mother? I whispered in horror. Rachel took the phone and read the messages, her face growing increasingly alarmed. Sarah, this is concerning. He's making it sound like you're having some kind of breakdown. I'm not. I stood up, suddenly feeling trapped. I'm reacting normally to finding out my husband has been invading my privacy for years. I know that. But he's spinning this, making it about your mental health instead of his violation. She scrolled through more messages. Has he done this before? Turn things around to make you seem irrational. I thought back on our marriage, seeing patterns I'd never noticed before. The subtle ways he'd question my recollection of events. The times he'd shared concerns about me with his family, presenting them as loving worry. I think he has, I said slowly. I just never saw it clearly until now. The phone rang in Rachel's hand, Martin again. She silenced it and set it aside. You're staying here tonight. Tomorrow we can figure out next steps. For the first time since finding Martin with my journal, I felt like I could breathe. I woke to knocking on Rachel's front door. Harsh, insistent knocking. Sarah, Martin's voice carried through the house. I know you're in there. Rachel's car is here. I froze, heart hammering in my chest, as Rachel emerged from her bedroom in a robe. Don't answer it, I whispered. I wasn't planning to, she whispered back, peering through the peephole. His mother is with him. My stomach dropped. Patricia, my mother-in-law, had never approved of me. Too independent, too career-focused for her precious son. Finding out I sometimes vented about her in my journal would be all the ammunition she needed. Sarah, please, Martin called. We're worried about you. You're not thinking clearly. Rachel pulled out her phone. If they don't leave in 5 minutes, I'm calling the police. The knocking continued for several more minutes before I heard Patricia's distinctive voice. She's obviously not stable right now, Martin. We should give her space to calm down. Then we can discuss getting her help. Their voices faded, and soon I heard car doors shutting. Rachel confirmed they'd left before I dared move from the guest room. They're trying to make me sound crazy, I said, wrapping my arms around myself. For having normal private thoughts and being upset they were violated. It's gaslighting, Rachel said firmly. And it stops now. She pulled out a notebook, not a journal, a plain legal pad, and set it on the kitchen table. We need to document what's happening. When did you start keeping that journal? About 5 years ago. After Dad died. And where did you keep it? In my desk drawer. It has a lock, and I've always kept the key with me. Rachel wrote it all down. So he must have found a way to unlock it. Or had a copy of the key made. I suddenly remembered something. Last year, my keys went missing for a day. Martin insisted I'd left them at the library, but then they reappeared on our dresser. He said he'd found them in the bathroom. I closed my eyes, realizing. He must have had copies made. That fits his pattern, Rachel noted grimly. Creating confusion, making you doubt your memory. The thought made my skin crawl. How many nights had he waited until I was asleep to rifle through my private thoughts? What exactly did he reference yesterday? Which entries? I closed my eyes, recalling. He specifically mentioned what I wrote about his mother. That was from about 2 years ago, when she stayed with us for 3 weeks and rearranged my entire kitchen without asking. What else? He mentioned entries about me wondering if I'd made a mistake. That was from a really low period last year when I was passed over for promotion. I was questioning everything in my life, not just our marriage. As we continued cataloging what I could remember, a clearer picture emerged. Martin had been strategically reading my journal for years, using my private thoughts to shape his behavior and manipulate situations in his favor. No wonder he always seemed to know exactly what to say, I murmured. He was reading the script I unwittingly wrote for him. By evening, I'd received dozens more messages from Martin, each more concerning than the last. He'd told his sister, his closest friends, even our pastor, that I was having some sort of breakdown and had run away when confronted about troubling thoughts in my journal. He's creating a narrative, Rachel said grimly, so that when you tell people he's been reading your journal for years, they'll already be primed to see you as unstable. I looked down at my phone as another text came in. Everyone's worried about you. Pastor Mike says you need to come home so we can work through this together. I need to get some things from the house, I said suddenly. Clothes, important documents. And I need to see if he's been invading my privacy in other ways. Rachel frowned. Is it safe to go back? He'll be at work until 6. It's only 1 now. We can be in and out in an hour. She nodded reluctantly. I'm coming with you. The house was quiet when we entered. Everything looked normal, unnervingly so, as if the previous day hadn't happened. I went straight to my office, Rachel following close behind. Let's be methodical, she said. What else might he have accessed? I unlocked my computer, checking my email and browsing history first. Nothing seemed amiss. Then I remembered my password manager. Oh God, I whispered as I checked the access logs. He's been in my email and my bank account. Rachel leaned over my shoulder, her expression grim. When? Regularly. For at least 2 years. I scrolled through the log. And my medical portal. He's been reading my messages with my doctor. The violation felt endless, expanding beyond the journal to every corner of my digital life. How had I never noticed? Let's gather your important documents and get out of here, Rachel said, her voice tight. We can deal with the digital stuff later. I nodded, moving to the filing cabinet where we kept our important papers. Birth certificate, social security card, passport. I gathered them all, along with financial statements and insurance policies. As I was closing the drawer, something caught my eye. A small metallic object had fallen behind the files. What's that? Rachel asked as I fished it out. I held it up, my blood turning to ice. A small digital voice recorder, switched to on. He's been recording me. My voice sounded distant to my own ears. In my own office, Rachel took the device, examining it. Let's listen to it at my house. We need to finish up here. I nodded, numb with shock, and continued gathering my belongings. As we were about to leave, I remembered one last thing. My new journal. I started it last month after filling the other one. Where is it? Hidden in my nightstand. I had started keeping it there, paranoid about leaving it in my desk after noticing the pages seemed disturbed occasionally. In the bedroom, I pulled open the nightstand drawer and pushed aside the false bottom. The journal was there, apparently untouched. I grabbed it and a few more clothes before heading for the door. As we were leaving, I spotted Martin's home office across the hall. On impulse, I stepped inside. Sarah, we should go, Rachel urged. Just 1 minute. I moved to his desk and tried the drawers. The top ones were unlocked, containing nothing unusual. The bottom drawer was locked. We don't have time to find a key, Rachel said nervously. I glanced around the room, then moved to the bookshelf. Behind the row of business books Martin never read was a small key, exactly where it had always been. The locked drawer slid open to reveal a notebook I recognized with a jolt, my old journal, the one I'd lost 2 years ago. Beneath it were several USB drives labeled with dates. He's been copying my journals, I whispered, lifting out the USB drives. And who knows what's on these? Rachel checked her watch. We need to go. Now. I grabbed everything and we hurried out to her car, my mind reeling with the extent of Martin's invasion. Back at Rachel's house, we spread everything on her dining table. My old journal, the USB drives, the voice recorder. Evidence of a violation, so complete it took my breath away. Should we listen to the recording? Rachel asked, eyeing the voice recorder warily. I nodded, unable to speak. She pressed play, and Martin's voice filled the room. Day 47 of monitoring. Sarah spent 30 minutes writing in her new journal. Location still unknown. Check the desk, usual spots. We'll search bedroom more thoroughly when she's at book club tomorrow. Behavior continues to be concerning. Discussed vegetarianism with her mother again despite my allergies. Planning requires adjustment. Rachel stopped the recording, her face pale. Sarah, this is beyond invasion of privacy. This is stalking. I felt sick. He's been monitoring me like I'm some kind of science experiment. Or a threat. We need to call someone. A lawyer, at minimum. I nodded, still processing what I'd heard. But first, let's see what's on these drives. The first USB contains scanned copies of my journal entries, meticulously organized by date. The second held spreadsheets documenting my patterns, as Martin called them, who I spoke to, how long I spend on various activities, notes on my concerning behaviors. The third drive made my heart stop. It contained a document titled Intervention Planning. Sarah's unstable thinking has progressed to potentially dangerous levels. Mother agrees psychiatric evaluation may be necessary. Plan to confront after gathering sufficient evidence. Goal: voluntary commitment for assessment. If resistant, consider involuntary options with Pastor Mike's support. He's planning to have me committed, I whispered, horrified. Because I wrote about being unhappy with his mother. About sometimes feeling trapped. Rachel read over my shoulder, her hands gripping the back of my chair. This is calculated. Evil. I scrolled down further, finding a list of witnesses Martin had been cultivating, friends and family he'd been feeding concerns about my mental state for months. No wonder Jen has been distant, I said, recognizing my friend's name on the list. He's been telling her I'm unstable. Rachel grabbed her phone. I'm calling Mark. Right now. Her husband was a family lawyer, and while divorce wasn't his specialty, he would know who to call. As she stepped into the kitchen to make the call, I continued reading the document, each word cementing my determination. This wasn't just about privacy anymore. Martin was actively plotting to discredit me, potentially strip me of my freedom, all to maintain control. When Rachel returned, her expression was grim but determined. Mark's calling his colleague who specializes in high-conflict divorces. She can see you tomorrow at 9 a.m. Thank you. I took a deep breath. I need to document all of this now while it's fresh. Rachel nodded, pulling out her laptop. Let's make copies of everything. And I think you should start a new record, a documentation of what's happening now. I opened a new document and began typing, chronologically laying out everything that had happened since finding Martin with my journal. As I wrote, I felt a strange calm descend. The shock was wearing off, replaced by clarity. I'm going to need a restraining order, I said quietly. Yes, you are. Rachel's voice was firm. And you're staying here until this is sorted. I glanced at my phone, which had finally fallen silent after Martin's barrage of messages. The last one had simply read, "We'll talk when you come home. You need help, Sarah." I'm not going back, I said, surprising myself with my certainty. Not after this. Rachel squeezed my shoulder. Good. Now let's make sure you never have to. The lawyer's office was sleek and minimalist, much like the woman herself. Caroline Moss listened without interruption as I laid out the evidence of Martin's invasion and manipulation, her expression betraying nothing beyond professional concern. I found myself pausing several times during my explanation, overwhelmed by the need to justify why I hadn't noticed sooner, why I'd stayed so long. Each time, Caroline simply waited, her patient silence giving me space to process as I spoke. "I should have seen it," I finally said, staring down at my hands. "There were signs." "Most people don't see it," Caroline replied gently. "Controlling behavior usually escalates so gradually that each step seems reasonable in isolation. It's only when you step back that the pattern becomes clear." She gave me a moment before continuing. "Unfortunately, this type of controlling behavior is more common than people realize. The good news is you've done exactly the right thing by documenting everything and removing yourself from the house." I took a deep breath. "What's next?" I asked, hands clasped tightly in my lap. "We file for an emergency protective order based on the evidence of stalking and psychological abuse. Then we initiate divorce proceedings." She tapped her pen on her notepad. "The documentation you've gathered is extremely helpful, especially the intervention planning document. Will it be enough?" The question came out small, reflecting my fear that somehow Martin would manage to twist this too. "It should be, but we need to act quickly. Men like your husband often escalate when they feel control slipping away." As if on cue, my phone buzzed. A text from an unfamiliar number. "Sarah, it's Patricia. Martin is distraught. He only wanted to help you. Please come home and talk to us. We have Dr. Levine here to discuss treatment options." I showed it to Caroline, who frowned deeply. They've already moved to the next phase of their plan. "This confirms the urgency." She pulled out several forms. "Let's get started right away." For the next 2 hours, we completed paperwork, developed a safety plan, and began the process of legally protecting me from the man I had trusted for 15 years. When we finished, Caroline walked me to her door. "Keep documenting everything. Don't engage directly with him or his family. And consider starting therapy with someone who specializes in emotional abuse." I nodded, feeling simultaneously exhausted and empowered. "Thank you. One more thing," she added as I was leaving. "Start a new journal. One that reclaims the practice for what it should be, your private space for processing your thoughts." I smiled faintly. "I already have." 3 days later, Martin was served with the protective order and divorce papers while at work. Within hours, my phone exploded with messages from mutual friends and his family, all variations on the same theme. I was overreacting. He was worried about me. He only wanted what was best for me. Among the barrage, one message stood out. It was from Ben, Martin's colleague who had attended many of our dinner parties over the years. "Sarah, I don't know exactly what's happening, but something about Martin's story doesn't add up. He's been acting strange at work for months. If you need someone who isn't automatically on his side, I'm here." I stared at the message for a long time, relief washing over me that at least one person sensed something was wrong with Martin's narrative. I replied with a simple thank you, making a mental note to reach out when I felt stronger. For now, I didn't respond to the others. Instead, I sat at Rachel's kitchen table with my new journal, a bright blue notebook with a built-in lock, and wrote about my day. About the fear that still lingered at the edges of my mind. About the strange lightness I felt despite everything. When I finished, I locked the journal and placed the key on my new keychain, next to the key for my new apartment Rachel had helped me find. My phone buzzed again, another flying monkey dispatched by Martin to bring me back into the fold. I silenced it without reading the message and turned back to Rachel, who was helping me sort through the clothes we'd retrieved from the house. "I was thinking," I said casually, "about taking that librarian position in St. Paul. The one I mentioned a few months ago." Rachel smiled. "I think that's a fantastic idea." I nodded, a small smile forming. "Me too. It's time to write a new chapter." And for the first time in years, I knew the words would be entirely my own. 3 months later, I sat in my new apartment, surrounded by unpacked boxes, but feeling more at home than I had in years. The protective order had been extended after Martin violated it twice, attempting to reason with me at the library. The divorce proceedings were contentious, but progressing. My new journal lay open on my lap, pages filled with reflections on my journey. Today's entry was different, though. Today I was writing about hope. I'm starting to recognize myself again. The woman who existed before Martin slowly chipped away at her edges, before he read every private thought and used it against me. Some days are still hard. I still find myself checking for hidden recorders or wondering if my privacy is being invaded. But those moments are becoming fewer. Dr. Chin says that's normal. Recovery isn't linear. The hypervigilance will fade with time. Meanwhile, I'm rebuilding. New friends who know my real story, not Martin's version. A job I love. A home that's truly mine. I never imagined at 35 I'd be starting over completely. But there's something powerful in this blank page. This time, I'm writing my own story with full knowledge that these words are mine alone. I closed the journal, locked it, and placed it on my bedside table. Then I picked up my phone and dialed Rachel. "Hey," I said when she answered. "Want to help me paint the living room this weekend?" "I'm thinking yellow. Something bright." As I listened to her enthusiastic response, I gazed around my small but perfect apartment. Martin had tried to write my story for me, to cast me as unstable and dangerous for having normal human thoughts and emotions. For years, he'd read my most private reflections and used them to manipulate and control me. But this was my epilogue to that story, and I was reclaiming the narrative. One journal entry, one yellow wall, one independent decision at a time. Was I wrong to leave so completely? Should I have tried harder to work things out with a man who systematically violated my privacy for years? Tell me what you would have done in my place.